"You don't need to come this time, Mom." Grayson's voice was tight, like he'd rehearsed the line but still wasn't sure how to say it. I was standing in the kitchen with a pot holder in one hand, the scent of cinnamon and apples still rising from the cobbler on the counter. The wine bottle I'd picked up for Brielle sat in a paper bag by the door. A small card was taped to it. Just a plain thank you with my name scribbled at the bottom. I looked up from the pie brushing flour off my hands. "What do you mean I don't need to come?" He glanced down at his phone, then back up. "It's just, Brielle's boss is coming to dinner tonight. She's trying to make a good impression, and we thought maybe he cleared his throat. Maybe it's best if it's just the four of us." I weighted my hands, still my chest quiet. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "It's not personal. That's always what people say right before they make it personal." I smiled just a little. "So, I'd be..." "What? A distraction." He didn't answer right away. "It's not like that." I let the silence stretch. Then, barely louder than a whisper, he said it. "This place isn't for useless old people." My ears rang. I didn't speak. I just stood there while the words settled into the room like dust you can't wipe away. Grayson looked up at me, searching for a reaction. I think he expected me to argue, or maybe cry. I did neither. I simply turned, took the cobbler from the counter, and set it on the stovetop to cool. I wiped the counter slowly, rinsed the mixing bowl, and hung the dish towel on the oven handle. My hands moved like they had a memory of their own. I didn't rush. I didn't tremble. "I understand," I said finally. He exhaled like that made things easier. I didn't tell him I'd picked out the wine a week ago after hearing Brielle mention it during a grocery run. I didn't say the cobbler was made from the last batch of apples from the tree Tom planted before he passed. I didn't mention that I'd spent all morning scrubbing the cuffs of my cardigan or pressing the hem of the dress I only wear when I want to feel nice. Grayson kissed me on the cheek before he left, light as air. "Thanks for understanding, Mom." I nodded, but I didn't look at him. The door closed softly behind him, and the sound of it echoed too long in the house. I moved the wine bottle to the pantry, tucked the card into the junk drawer, and poured myself a glass of water. The clock ticked overhead. I sat at the small kitchen table in the back of the guest house, hands folded, listening to the quiet. I stared at the cobbler. The crust was perfect this time. The apples had cooked down just enough to melt, and that's when I remembered Leonard Miles. I wasn't always this quiet. There was a time I raised my voice, not in anger, but in defense. When Tom got sick and the insurance started playing tricks with their coverage letters, I stood in the office of the hospital administrator and made sure someone listened. But the fighting takes something out of you over time, especially when the people you fought for forget you ever raised your voice at all. After Tom passed, I cleaned the middle school hallways every night for nearly 6 years. The pay was decent, the hours brutal. I'd come home with bleach-stained hands and swollen ankles, but I never let Grayson see me complain. He needed normal. He needed peace. In the mornings before he left for school, I made pancakes, even if we only had one egg left. And when the counselor at Central High called to say Grayson had a knack for computers, I took extra shifts. I skipped lunch most days for almost a year so I could put aside money for his first set of coding courses. I'd keep crackers in my locker to quiet my stomach. There were nights I would sit at the kitchen table watching him build his first basic app, thinking, let him go farther than I ever could. When he married Brielle, I moved out of the main house without being asked. They never said a word, but I could feel her discomfort each time I passed through the living room while she had clients on speaker. "Sorry, just my mother-in-law walking through," she'd say always with that laugh that meant she wasn't really sorry. I took the shed out back, cleaned it, scrubbed the mildew from the corners, and put in a small heater with the money I'd saved from sewing for the church ladies. I told Grayson I liked it smaller, meant cozier, easier to keep warm. He nodded and never questioned it. But there was more than Grayson and Brielle. There was a boy named Leonard. He was 15 when I found him sitting behind the dumpster next to our chain-link fence, his sweatshirt torn at the sleeve and blood drying along his forearm. I was taking out the trash late one night back when Grayson was still in middle school. He flinched when I spoke, said he wasn't stealing, just resting. I asked if he was hungry. He didn't answer, but his eyes did. I gave him leftover stew, still warm, and a clean rag for the bleeding. I didn't ask questions, just pointed him toward the laundry room and told him he could wash up. He came back wrapped in one of Tom's old flannel shirts, and I swear it made him look like someone's son again. He said his name was Leonard, that he'd been bouncing from foster homes since he was 6, that he ran away after a fight with his latest guardian who called him wasted state money. He'd been sleeping in stairwells and garages for 2 nights. I made a call that night not to the police but to Coach Mendez, Tom's old teammate who ran the youth football league over on Hale Street. Coach had a soft spot for strays and a habit of pulling favors. Leonard stayed with Coach's cousin until the paperwork came through. He got into the local GED program, earned his diploma, and last I heard years ago now, he'd gone into investment banking of all things. I saw his name once in an alumni magazine right next to a headline about small-town success stories. I cut the clipping out and taped it to the inside of my kitchen cupboard. Not because I wanted credit, but because I knew what one bowl of stew, a flannel shirt, and a phone call could do. And that's when I heard the knock on my door. The microwave hummed softly while I stood barefoot in the kitchenette staring out the back window. Through the blur of glass and distance, I could see the glow from their dining room, Grayson's house, the main house. Candlelight flickered. Someone laughed. The kind of laughter that sounds fuller when it's not coming from your own throat. My casserole dinged. I didn't rush to get it. I watched a silhouette tall, lean pass across the window. Maybe Brielle, maybe one of her friends from the firm. I couldn't tell. I wondered if she'd serve my cobbler. Probably not. It didn't come in glossy packaging. I took my food from the microwave, set the plate down on the small table, and sat. The silence in my little shed was thicker than gravy. I picked at the edges of the casserole, barely tasting it. The crust had gone soggy from the fridge, but I ate it anyway. Waste never sat well with me. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. A single text, Brielle, thanks for understanding. I set the fork down. I stared at that screen until it dimmed on its own. Then I tapped a different name, one I hadn't called in years but had never deleted. The phone rang once, then twice. Miriam Calderon, a man, answered. His voice hadn't changed. Leonard. I said quietly, "They don't know you're coming, do they?" He paused for half a beat. "Not yet," he said. "But I'm about 5 minutes away." I stood, walked over to the sink, and rinsed my plate. My hands moved without needing instructions. I dried them on the same towel I'd used that morning. The laughter from the big house floated through the evening air, muffled but unmistakable. I slipped on my cardigan and stepped outside. The stars were just beginning to punch through the blue-black sky. Their porch lights cast long shadows across the yard. I could see the outline of wine glasses raised to lips, the clink of forks against plates. Brielle wore something silky in dark red. Grayson poured wine with the same casual hand Tom used to have during holidays back when we were all under one roof, and I still had a place set by default, not request. I walked a little closer, just far enough to see clearly, not close enough to be seen. That's when the car pulled up, black, quiet, polished. Leonard stepped out in a navy coat and crisp shirt. He looked older, broader, but not diminished. He walked to the front door with easy confidence, the kind that can't be taught in school or borrowed from money. He knocked once firmly. The porch light caught his face just before the door opened. Brielle blinked in surprise. Grayson appeared behind her, startled. Leonard smiled warmly and extended his hand. And from where I stood, I could see it clear as day she hadn't known. Neither of them had. I turned and made my way back to the guest house. The air was cool against my cheeks, but I didn't shiver. I had just reached the steps when I heard his voice inside, cheerful but unmistakable. Lovely place. I was told I'd be meeting family tonight. From my place by the window, I could still hear bits and pieces of conversation drifting across the yard. Laughter had shifted into polite chuckles. The sound of silverware was steadier now, more deliberate. The kind of quiet that meant people were trying to impress someone. I imagined Leonard sitting at the head of the table, his coat now hung neatly over the back of a chair, his napkin folded precisely in his lap. I knew his habits. He'd been raised rough, but somewhere along the way, someone taught him the tools of civility. That kind of polish didn't come from charm school. It came from gratitude. He never forgot the doors that opened for him. The next laugh I heard was different, shorter, less sure. Inside, Brielle was filling wine glasses when Leonard said, "This is lovely, Brielle. Grayson tells me you've done most of the decorating yourself." "Oh," she said, surprised. "Yes. I try to keep things clean and elegant." There was a pause. Then, Leonard asked, "Will Miriam be joining us?" The air must have thinned because the house went dead quiet. I leaned in closer. Brielle cleared her throat. "We didn't think she'd feel comfortable. It's a business dinner sort of, and she keeps to herself." Leonard's voice stayed even. "That's interesting. I was under the impression this was a family gathering." Grayson spoke next. "She prefers to eat early. We told her she didn't need to because she'd feel out of place," Leonard asked, still calm. No one answered. "I suppose you'd know," he continued, "what it feels like to be told you're not welcome somewhere." Silence. Then I heard him set his glass down. I could imagine the faint clink against the table. "Miriam Calderon once kept me from freezing to death behind her fence on a night like this," he said. "I was 15, running from a house that smelled like liquor and sounded like fists. I had a split lip and a torn hoodie, and I was too proud to knock. But she saw me, brought me inside, fed me, bandaged my hand. The room stayed quiet. She didn't ask what I did to deserve help. She just helped. She called a man who got me into a safe place. She gave me a clean shirt, and then she gave me a future. I got back in school because of her. I graduated. I built a career." He paused, letting it sink in. "I owe her everything." No one spoke. The clink of a fork hit a plate. Someone must have reached for water. I imagined Brielle's expression tight, embarrassed. Grayson's would be worse, pale and stuck somewhere between shame and defensiveness. Leonard's voice lowered. "And yet tonight, she's not sitting at this table." I didn't need to hear more. I stepped away from the window and returned to my seat. My tea had gone cold. I poured it out and filled the kettle again, slow and steady. Outside, I heard Leonard rise from his chair, the scrape of it on the hardwood floor, a soft apology. The door creaked open. I knew where he was going, so I straightened my sweater and waited. The knock came just after 9. I'd already swept the floors, boiled water for tea, and hung the laundry outside before the sun pushed its way through the clouds. I knew that kind of knock Timid rehearsed, not the kind that comes from a neighbor. It was the knock of someone who wants something but isn't sure how much they're allowed to ask. I opened the door. Grayson stood there with a forced smile and a bakery bag in his hands. Brielle was next to him holding a takeout coffee tray like it might break if she breathed too hard. "Morning, Mom," he said a little too brightly. "We brought muffins. From that place you like Hazel's, I didn't step aside." Brielle cleared her throat. "Do you have a minute? We were hoping to talk." I let them in because I was raised to be civil, not because I was eager. They sat stiffly on the bench by the window. Grayson looked around at the shed as if he were seeing it for the first time, the handmade shelves, the neatly folded blankets, the calendar with old notes scrawled beside each date. Brielle set the coffee tray down and folded her hands. Leonard stopped by again this morning. He said he wants to launch something, a foundation maybe for young workers, apprenticeships, trade programs. She smiled carefully. "He thinks you should help shape it. Said you'd have real insight." Grayson added, "It could be something meaningful. Your name would be on it." I watched them both waiting for the shift. It didn't take long. And Brielle continued, "We'd like to be involved too. We've been thinking maybe this could be a chance to rebuild, start fresh." She said the words like she meant them, but I've lived long enough to hear what sits underneath. "It's not about yesterday," she said. "It's about moving forward." I set down my teacup. "Moving forward now that Leonard gave you permission to see me." Grayson's jaw twitched. "That's not fair, Mom." "No," I said evenly. "It's not." But neither was Thursday night. He looked down. I stood and walked to the small counter, opened the bakery bag, and took out a single muffin. Blueberry, my favorite. I held it in my hand for a moment, then placed it gently on a saucer and slid it across the table. "For your effort," I said. "But I'm not here to polish your image. I'm done shrinking so you can feel tall." Brielle stiffened. Grayson shifted. "It's not like that." "It is," I said. "You didn't come because you wanted me at the table. You came because someone else told you I belonged." The room went still. The space between us stretched out like thread pulled too tight. "I won't be part of your correction," I added. "Whatever Leonard's building, if he asks me directly, I'll listen. But this isn't apology. This is strategy." Grayson didn't argue. He just nodded slowly like he finally understood something I'd been trying to teach him for years. They left a few minutes later. The coffee tray still sat on my table. I poured both cups down the sink. The muffins went in the trash. By noon, the phone rang. I saw Leonard's name and picked it up without hesitation. The room was full of polished wood and pressed shirts, glasses clinking gently against white linen. People moved with that curated ease that comes from knowing they belonged or believing they did. Leonard stood at the podium, hands folded, voice steady, as he welcomed the crowd to the launch of the Miles Initiative for Skilled Youth. I sat near the front, not hidden in a corner, not behind a buffet table or tucked at a back row. I was seated beside a woman from the state workforce board and across from a union leader I'd seen on the news once. When Leonard introduced me, he didn't call me a guest or a supporter. He called me the woman who saved a future. There was polite applause at first, but when I stepped to the mic and began to speak just a few words about the dignity of work, the cost of being invisible, the way we raise boys and girls to overlook the people who clean their messes and hold the world steady, something shifted. People leaned in. I saw nods. I saw stillness, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from obligation but from recognition. I didn't speak long. I never did. Afterward, 3 young women came up to me. One worked at a mechanic shop in Topeka, another was apprenticing in carpentry, and the third hadn't started anything yet, just wanted to. She shook my hand twice, then hugged me like I was something solid in a world that didn't always feel that way. When the event wrapped, Leonard walked me to my car himself. He didn't say much, just gave me a hug that lasted a second longer than polite society would expect. I meant every word he said. I know I replied. Driving home, I passed fields beginning to yellow with early fall. The trees wore tired green like a last layer of pride before letting go. The road was smooth, the sky open. I didn't think about the main house until I pulled into the driveway and saw the porch light flick on. Grayson was standing by the window. He saw my car. He didn't wave. Neither did I. I carried a sack of apples inside and set them on the counter. Peeled and sliced them. The cobbler went into the oven by muscle memory. I wasn't making it for them. I hadn't made it for them in years. This batch was for the ladies at the retirement home where I volunteer on Thursdays. They always smile when I walk in. They always remember my name. While the cobbler baked, I sorted through the small stack of mail on my shelf. Most of it was the usual flyers, pharmacy coupons, a gas bill. One envelope stood out, bright purple, no return address. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, wide-ruled and written in rounded letters. "Ms. Miriam, you make me feel like I'm not too small to matter." I read it once, then again. Then I placed it in the drawer with my clipped newspaper articles and Coach Mendez's old thank you card. The smell of cinnamon filled the space, soft and warm. I didn't light a candle. I didn't turn on music. I just sat in the stillness, letting it wrap around me like a blanket I'd sewn myself. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel left out of anything. I felt full.